serial killer, someone you've never heard about, is slowly being unmasked right here in Massachusetts. In this New England's Unsolved, the case of
arrest in the murder case of Tanya Frazier.
Friday afternoon. I might repeat some background here, but I think it's important to restate that on Tuesday of last week, medical experts advised there was little hope then for us to find Gus.
He's on the FBI's top 10 wanted list, and now he's facing new charges in connection.
Welcome to Strange and Scary Mysteries of the Month, where the darkest real-life cases unfolding right now get dragged straight into the light. These are the stories nobody wants to talk about, but everyone needs to hear. Thanks for tapping in with Scary Mysteries today, because December 2025 is already stacked with chilling cases that refuse to stay buried. Number 5 is already sending shockwaves through New England. A possible traveling serial killer, a name almost nobody knows, is slowly being exposed right in Massachusetts. This isn't some old cold case either. This is unfolding in real time, tied to an unsolved trail known as the New England mystery surrounding Kevin Leno. For years, deaths involving unhoused men were brushed aside like background noise. Authorities chalked them up to street violence, bad luck, overdoses, or bodies turning up far from where anyone last saw them alive. Nobody wanted to connect the dots. Nobody wanted to look deeper. But once investigators finally stacked the cases side by side, something ugly jumped out fast. The timelines matched, the locations echoed each other, and one name kept surfacing again and again. That's when it hit them. These weren't random tragedies. Someone was moving quietly and intentionally. Kevin Leno spent his early years around Lowell, then drifted endlessly from state to state. He stayed in tents, abandoned lots, and makeshift camps near railroad tracks, blending into survival zones where trust is thin and police rarely show up. Some people said he helped others. Others claimed he played the role of an enforcer. The stories didn't match, and that confusion helped him fade into the background. Those early impressions made him look invisible, just another man scraping by. The communities he passed through were already fragile, already overlooked, and already struggling to survive. In places like that, fights break out fast, overdoses are common, and danger blends into daily life. That chaos created perfect cover, and nobody noticed what was really happening until it was almost too late. Bodies showing up was nothing new in those spaces, and that ugly reality kept these deaths off the front page. Against that backdrop, tragedy blended into the background noise of survival. In 2010, police in Lowell discovered the body of 54-year-old Gary Melanson at a riverside encampment. He had been beaten to death with an aluminum baseball bat, and nearby residents reported hearing shouting, but that was about it. Officers tried to piece together what happened, but the stories were messy and incomplete. Some witnesses claimed they didn't know anything. Others clearly didn't want to talk. Street rules kicked in hard. Nobody wanted to be labeled a rat. With no solid cooperation and no clear timeline, the case hit a wall fast and quietly stalled. 2 years later, in Cambridge, another unhoused man, 30-year-old Douglas Clark, was found dead. Authorities ruled it a heroin overdose. Clark was well known around the Harvard Square MBTA station, and most people assumed it was just another accidental hotshot. With that assumption locked in, the investigation barely moved an inch. Then things took a darker turn out west. In August of 2014, in Missoula, the body of 36-year-old Gilbert Jack Berry was pulled from the Clark Fork River. Berry had been living in a riverside camp and was last seen with several people, including Kevin Leno. The condition of Berry's body shocked investigators. He had been brutally beaten, stripped, carved up, and dumped in the water. That level of violence screamed intent. It wasn't some argument gone sideways. Montana detectives pushed hard, and the trail pointed straight at Leno. And just like that, he vanished from the state. Leno was arrested later that month in Shreveport, extradited back to Montana, and by 2015 he was sentenced to 40 years for Barry's murder. That should have closed the book, but it didn't. Back in Massachusetts, investigators were watching closely. The brutality, the control inside encampments, the witness dynamics, it all clashed with the earlier accidental death narratives. Cold case detectives reopened Melancon's 2010 killing and Clark's 2012 overdose, realizing the story might be far from over. As investigators dug deeper, pulling phone records, field interviews, and medical reports, a whole new picture snapped into focus fast. Witnesses suddenly remembered details they had brushed off years earlier. Several recalled Kevin Leno openly threatening Douglas Clark, while others described rising tension between Leno and Gary Melancon on the very night Melancon was killed. Then came the turning point. A forensic reanalysis of Clark's death flipped everything upside down. What had been logged as a simple overdose no longer fit the evidence. Investigators now believed it was a deliberate poisoning, carefully disguised to look accidental. By 2025, prosecutors and Middlesex County District Attorney were done waiting. Leno was formally charged in both killings and publicly labeled what many had suspected all along, a serial killer. Now convicted of multiple murders across different states, Leno also stands accused of at least 2 more deaths. Each case follows the same dark pattern: unhoused men, fragile communities, and disappearances that barely raised alarms. Policing these spaces is brutally difficult. People vanish for countless reasons. Records are thin, and witnesses are scared to speak. Investigators believe there may be more victims, men whose names were never recorded and whose bodies were never found. When violence targets the margins of society, it becomes dangerously easy to get away with it. Number 4 takes us to Seattle, and a case that still haunts the city decades later. In 1994, Tanya Frazier was a 14-year-old student attending summer school at Meany Middle School on Capitol Hill. She had also just started her first job at a neighborhood thrift store and took that responsibility seriously. On July 18th, she left school and began walking toward work. A friend later said the girls had lingered briefly when an unfamiliar man approached them near a truck. Tanya was seen heading in that direction, and then she vanished. 5 long days passed with no contact, no sightings, and growing fear, until a man walking his dog made a devastating discovery in a wooded area near East Highland Drive, just blocks from the school. The case instantly shifted from a missing person search to a homicide investigation. Despite the urgency, police had almost nothing to go on. No clear suspect, no solid witnesses, and only a vague memory of a man near a truck, leaving a family and a city with questions that still burn today. The hard truth is this: lots of men drive trucks, and the description Tanya's friends gave was painfully vague. Memories fade, details blur, and months later, those early recollections just didn't give detectives much to work with. Then, weeks later in West Seattle, a woman made a disturbing discovery near Longfellow Creek. A small pile of Tanya Frazier's belongings, her wallet, a school book, and clothing she'd worn the day she disappeared, had been left out in the open. The way those items were placed felt deliberate, almost like someone was sending a message. Detectives now had 2 connected scenes, but still no suspect. Police collected biological evidence from both the body and the area, but this was the 1990s. DNA technology was limited, and the partial profile they obtained couldn't be matched to anyone. Leads dried up, tips stopped coming in, and the case slowly slipped out of the spotlight. Unlike other high-profile Seattle crimes of that era, Tanya's case never got sustained attention, but her family refused to let it go. They hired a private investigator, Rose Quist, who pushed relentlessly for retesting as forensic science improved. Year after year, samples were re-examined. Each time, the result was the same: no match. By the 2020s, everything had changed. DNA databases expanded, testing became more precise, and cold cases finally had new life. Then, in the fall of 2025, the breakthrough arrived. A match came back to Mark Russ, a 57-year-old convicted felon with a long criminal record across Washington. When investigators looked deeper, one detail hit especially hard. In 1994, Russ's mother lived directly across the street from Manny Middle School. That proximity changed everything and added another layer of tragedy. Prosecutors allege that Russ targeted Tanya that day after encountering her near the school. He has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder, has pleaded not guilty, and is currently being held without bail. Decades later, the case that once seemed lost is finally facing a courtroom, bringing long-delayed answers closer than ever. Biological material recovered from the scene now matches Mark Russ, placing him exactly where Tanya Frazier was last seen alive. That connection is strong, but major questions still hang in the air. What hasn't been fully explained yet is the motive, the exact opportunity, or how the encounter unfolded step by step. The upcoming trial will be where all of that gets tested, including whether the DNA evidence holds up under intense scrutiny. Now, number 3 takes us somewhere completely different and just as unsettling. In the Australian outback, distance plays tricks on the mind. What looks close can actually take an hour to reach, and familiar land can turn dangerous fast. On a massive, remote property stretching toward the horizon, a 4-year-old boy wandered away in late September 2025. At first, people believed he'd be found quickly. After all, there was nothing but open land in every direction. But nothing turned up. Oak Park Station sits about 40 miles south of the small outback town of Orroroo, deep in South Australia's mid-north region. The property is enormous, comparable in size to a town in the U.S. Tracks cut through scrubby hills and dry creek beds. Sheep roam freely, and families who live there grow up understanding isolation. Out here, children are taught early about distance, water, and heat. That heat is the real danger. Gus Lamont was born into that environment and spent most days outdoors, trailing family members and watching daily routines. On the afternoon of September 27, 2025, he was doing exactly that, playing in the sand near a low mound not far from the house. Around 5:30 p.m., his grandmother realized he was no longer in sight. At first, no one panicked. Kids sometimes wander behind sheds or follow animals. Usually you spot them quickly, but this time was different. The first sweep found nothing. Then the search widened, 20 minutes, then 30. As daylight faded, the land itself became a threat. Temperatures dropped fast, and the terrain was full of gullies, holes, and wire-snared brush that could easily hide someone small. By nightfall, police were called in. Headlights swept the ground, officers searched on foot, and state emergency service volunteers moved into position as the outback closed in around them. Over the next few days, the search exploded into one of the largest the region had seen in recent memory. Every possible resource was thrown into the effort to find Gus Lamont. Helicopters swept overhead, drones scanned the ground, and specialist tracking teams moved methodically across the land. Because of his age, time mattered more than anything, and the pressure climbed with every passing hour. By the end of the operation, crews had covered nearly 95 square kilometers of harsh terrain. They searched abandoned mine shafts as far as 12 kilometers from the homestead. Some were narrow, others dropped nearly 20 meters straight down. Cameras were lowered, sensors deployed, and every location was checked carefully, but every shaft came back clear. Investigators were firm and consistent in one key point. There was no evidence of abduction or outside interference. The family remained fully cooperative throughout the search. Still, the complete lack of physical trace, no clothing, no confirmed footprints, no remains, left everyone deeply unsettled. Survivability experts later explained that after several days in that environment, the chances of finding Gus alive were extremely low. Even so, most believed something would eventually surface. As of now, nothing has. The case remains open, defined more by what's missing than what's known. The outback doesn't behave like suburbs or cities. It absorbs movement, sound, and sometimes people without leaving answers behind. The land is vast, quiet, and unforgiving, and it offers no explanations unless evidence appears. Number 2 shifts continents and decades back. On a quiet November night in 1994, a simple errand set off a mystery that still hasn't let go. In a small town in Yorkshire, a 13-year-old girl stepped out to buy cereal from a nearby corner store. It was ordinary, routine, and completely uneventful until it wasn't. Somewhere between the store doorway and the short walk home, the line broke. That unanswered gap has now stretched for more than 30 years. Eden Bridge in the mid-1990s was the kind of place built on narrow roads, stone terraces, and predictable routines. People knew each other, and the Reimer family fit right into that rhythm. Lindsay Reimer was in 9th grade, and on November 7th, just after 10 p.m., she left her family's home on Cambridge Street to pick up a box of cornflakes for the next morning. Minutes later, her mother saw her briefly at a local pub when Lindsay stopped in to say hello. Then she headed back out into the night, never making it home. They spoke only for a moment. Lindsay Reimer told her mother she'd be right back and continued on her way. At 10:22 p.m., CCTV footage from the Spar store on Crown Street captured her entering, buying the cereal, and walking back out. That grainy clip became the last confirmed image of her alive. The next morning, when Lindsay failed to show up for her paper route, alarm bells went off. Police were called, and within hours, a full-scale search swept across Eden Bridge. Officers and volunteers canvassed streets, back paths, and shortcuts. Rumors swirled, talk of strangers, possible sightings, but none of it stuck. Weeks turned into months, and her disappearance stayed frozen in time. A teenager stepped out for cereal and never came back in a town where that just didn't happen. 5 months later, on April 12, 1995, the truth surfaced in the worst possible way. Workers dredging the Rochdale Canal near Rod Mill Lock pulled up something heavy from beneath the water. It was Lindsay. She was still fully clothed in what she had worn that night, and the change from the cornflakes purchase was still in her pocket. This wasn't an accident. Investigators determined she had been strangled and deliberately weighed down with a concrete block to keep her submerged. The section of canal where she was found was poorly secured despite sitting near a floodlit factory. Detectives believed whoever placed her there knew the area well, understood the access points, and may have even worked nearby. From there, the case churned endlessly. Officers reconstructed Lindsay's final walk again and again. Her older sister reenacted the route on television, hoping someone would recognize a detail they missed. Hundreds of interviews produced fragments, but never a breakthrough. A stolen red Honda Civic briefly looked promising before collapsing. Known offenders in the region were investigated and ruled out. By 2016, advances in forensic testing produced a DNA profile believed to belong to the killer. Even then, no match surfaced. Arrests in 2016 and 2017 ended with releases and no charges. The case never closed. That's the good news. The bad news is just as haunting. It stayed active, but completely stalled, leaving questions that still refuse to fade. In October of 2025, the case finally shifted. West Yorkshire police arrested a prisoner already serving time on suspicion of Lindsay Reimer's murder. Authorities haven't released the suspect's name, but they confirmed the arrest is directly connected to the long-held DNA evidence that's haunted this case for decades. Investigators are now actively seeking additional witnesses from the 1994 timeframe, narrowing their focus based on the individual in custody. There's still no conviction yet, and that part matters, but for the first time in over 30 years, detectives believe they finally have someone who can be physically linked to the evidence. After decades of dead ends, this is the closest the case has ever come to real accountability. The big question now is whether evidence collected across 3 decades will hold up in court under modern scrutiny. Number 1 is a story that feels almost unreal. An Olympic snowboarder doesn't usually end up on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. But in March of 2025, that's exactly what happened. The name added wasn't a cartel boss or a lifelong trafficker. It was Ryan Wedding, a former athlete who once represented Canada on the world stage. Somewhere between the slopes and the years that followed, his life took a hard turn. Wedding was born September 14, 1981, and grew up in Thunder Bay. Winter sports were second nature, and he thrived early. That talent carried him all the way to the 2002 Winter Olympics, where he competed in parallel giant slalom, an event built on speed, precision, and control. But Olympic glory doesn't guarantee a future, and only a handful of athletes turn it into long-term success. After the Games, Wedding drifted away from competition and into bodybuilding, then nightlife. Working around clubs exposed him to a different crowd, people always looking for connections. Over time, he allegedly became someone who could make things happen. In 2006, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police raided a farm tied to him and discovered nearly 7,000 cannabis plants. Despite the scale, there wasn't enough evidence to pin it all on him, and he walked away from that case. By 2008, he was in the United States, where he was arrested during an undercover operation involving illegal substances. That charge stuck, and he served 4 years. But here's where everything changed. When Wedding returned to Canada, he brought back connections made behind bars. Investigators allege he entered that world inexperienced, but walked out fully networked and ready to operate at a much higher level. Authorities say Ryan Wedding didn't just dabble, he scaled up fast. Prosecutors allege he partnered first with Iranian and Russian suppliers, then linked up with the Sinaloa cartel, building a massive pipeline that moved tens of tons of illegal product every year. This wasn't sloppy street dealing. It was an industrial operation spanning borders, trucking routes, and major ports. By 2023 and 2024, the operation allegedly turned violent. A superseding indictment filed in 2024 accuses Wedding of orchestrating multiple murders tied directly to his trafficking network, including the killings of Jakhtar and Harba Jan, the murder of Muhammad Zafar, and a separate hit targeting Randy Fader, allegedly carried out by one of his associates. U.S. prosecutors also claim he ordered a witness killing in Maine in 2025. At that point, investigators say the full picture snapped into place. The alleged network stretched from Ontario to Mexico to Colombia. And in March of 2025, the FBI officially placed Wedding on its 10 most wanted list, slapping a $10 million reward on his capture, later raised to a staggering $15 million. The agency labeled him a cartel-level trafficker, someone operating behind legitimate businesses while funneling profits into assets across North America. One of those assets surfaced in November. Federal agents seized a hyper-rare 2002 Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR Roadster in Los Angeles, valued at roughly $13 million. The move was meant to choke off his finances. But officials admit it's only a piece of the puzzle, because Wedding himself is still out there. U.S. authorities believe he's hiding in Mexico, rotating between safe houses with help from cartel intermediaries. Each seizure, each new indictment, and every reward increase tightens the net. But so far, it hasn't closed. And if the connections investigators describe are real, he may still be staying one step ahead, just like he once did on the Olympic stage. So there you have it, the strange and scary mysteries of the month for December 2025. If this episode had you locked in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-world mysteries you won't hear anywhere else. Drop your thoughts in the comments, spread the word, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay safe, and don't miss what's coming next.